Hey y'all, welcome back for day 14. We are going to get the bed back together today, but first let me go ahead and show you how to put this GFCI outlet in the bathroom. I forgot this in the last video and it was kind of mixed in with some other footage, so let me explain it real quick. All right, so for those of you who don't know, a GFCI outlet is going to be anywhere near a water source, like a sink, bathroom, kitchen, anything like that. And this one actually has two lines coming in. One of them is going to be the load, which is your main 110 volts coming in. And I have to figure out which two wires are the load. And then the ones that don't have power on it is going to be the line. So you're going to need to know the distinction between the two because you have to wire your load in the correct spot on the outlet and you have to wire the line on the correct spot on the outlet. Also for GFCI outlets or USB, if I don't have enough space in the wall, I'll use these outlet collars right here. I'll try to link those in my Amazon storefront if I can find them. This one was actually original to the camper, and sometimes the wall depth just really isn't there in order to put these giant outlets. So a couple more things on this GFCI outlet. Basically, the load is obviously the main power coming in, and the line is going to power any of the other outlets that are in sequence with this one outlet. All the other outlets that are in line with this will be GFCI protected. So just because it's a regular outlet on there doesn't necessarily mean that it's not GFCI protected if it is in anywhere near a water source. So just keep that in mind when you're installing these. These are super important to have. And I always do replace these just because they're, like maybe 20 bucks for one, and I'd rather know that they're working, than to have to worry about whether or not you're going to get electrocuted while you're using your sink. So there's just that. Okay, now that we've got that out the way, let's go ahead and start working on this bed frame. So I was going to keep some of the original framing for this bed, but then I was like, you know what? If I'm just going to have to redo all of it anyway, I might as well just trash the bed and make myself a whole new frame. So that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm just cutting down some 2x4s into 1.5-inch strips. That's perfectly sturdy enough for the bed, and I'm actually going to be attaching it to the studs or the supports, the aluminum supports that are in the wall. So this is pretty much going to be a freestanding bed support, and you'll see kind of what I'm talking about once I put it in the camper. All right, so now that I've ripped a bunch of it down, it's time for me to go ahead and cut them. So this is pretty much going to run the entire width of the camper and then plus a little more. And this is just me measuring. I didn't end up cutting these on my table saw because it was, I don't know. I used most of it, and so I took it over to my miter saw and went ahead and cut these on my miter saw, and then I can lay it out on the floor. This is part of the reason why I like having a nice big shop with a flat floor is I can lay these framing pieces out that I do on the floor, and it just makes life a lot easier. So this is going to have obviously a couple supports in the middle, one on each side to complete the rectangle, and I'm using my little clamps right here that I got. Y'all know I really like to use my little tiny corner clamps right here. Just keeps everything nice and square so I don't have to sit there with a square and worry about it while I'm drilling holes and then putting screws in. And anyway, that just seems like a lot, and whenever I can use them, I like using them because they're so tiny and cute and I really like them. All right, so once we got our corners clamped and screwed in, so that's all looks really nice, then I'm going to go ahead and put these middle support pieces in. There's really no rhyme or reason to where I put these. I just kind of, I think maybe 20 inches out or something from each side, and then slapped one right in the middle. There's no need to be perfect about this because these are just supports for the middle part of it, really just to hold up the OSB that I'm going to put on top of this. But again, you build it however you want to build it. This is just how I built it. All right, so now that that's built, I'm going to bring this bad boy out and blow it off because it's been in storage for quite a while. This is actually the platform, foot part, I guess you want to call, of the bed. And it's got 2 drawers in the front, which I think is really cool because most campers don't really have that. It's just kind of an empty space in the middle. But this has 2 drawers on the bottom and an empty space kind of in the middle on top where you can store stuff. So pretty cool design on this one. This is just me getting out the 17 gazillion staples, and I feel like I must have spent an hour getting all these staples out. This is part of that tedious work where it pays off in the long run. for you to just get the staples out versus like nailing them in, because you would probably take just as long trying to make sure all these things are flush versus just taking them out. Now, before I can put anything in here, I still have all these wires in the front coming from like the battery. These are the lights. There's just a bunch of stuff up here. So I'm going to go ahead and consolidate these, because up until this point, I was still just joining wires together, making sure everything worked properly before I started covering these up, make sure all the lights work. And so now that I know everything works, I'm just getting some zip ties and consolidating them together. And I do want them to be accessible, but I don't want to see them. And so this is me just getting a little, just strip right here and screwing it into the ground. And I'm going to use that kind of as a little anchor to make like a little angle type cover, I guess. And I can actually just plop it right on like that at an angle and screw it into my little board that I just screwed into the ground. This way, if I ever need to get back into it, or somebody else needs to get back to these wires in case something happens, they can still get to it. It just looks a whole lot better than just leaving stray wires right there and having them catch every time you put something in and out of that storage cubby. All right, so now that that's in place, I can start bringing in all of my pieces here. As you can see, that's that giant frame part that I made, and I so very gracefully put it in here. It was a little tight, but that's exactly how I want it to fit. And then I quickly realized that I need some type of measurement, because there's no way I'm going to be able to get that frame screwed into the wall and like hold it up at the same time and get it at the right height. So I am measuring, and then I measured that foot piece right there, and then I just went and cut a scrap piece of wood to that height, and I brought it back in the camper and kind of like set it upright, and I was able to get the right height and screw everything in. So if you see, yep, I think I actually cut two right there. So I kind of just propped it up right there, and then I can move it over. I did drill some pilot holes first so I wouldn't crack the wood. I did make a little mistake here, so I just figured I would include that for you guys so you didn't do what I did. But when I measured this piece of wood, I forgot to subtract the 1.5 inch thickness of my actual framing itself. So it's 1.5 inches higher than my little foot piece right there, which is fine. I ended up just adding some extra framing. You see, it doesn't match up. I added some extra framing on the bottom of that to raise it up, so crisis averted, but it's just one of those things where I wasn't paying attention and trying to go too fast. And anyway, out of all the mistakes I could make, that one's not too bad. All right, so that's screwed in. I made myself another bottom framing piece right here, and I needed that piece to attach the other foot piece in, and this is how it was originally made, into two pieces. So yep, just kind of tucked it right under the one that I had already screwed in, and then made sure it was square, kind of tapping it in place. Make sure it was square with the floor, and screwed it in. So yeah, I feel like it's starting to come together now and actually looking like a real bed. All right, next I'm going to go ahead and flip this over. As you can see, I added that extra 1.5 inches, so this is perfectly flush now. And I'm just centering it and marking it on my studs. I'm going to go ahead and cut myself out a piece of 1/8 inch paneling, and that I'm going to staple on the front of the bed. That way I don't have to worry about piecing together like random pieces. If I put the foot piece in first, it doesn't make sense. So it makes more sense to do it like this. So as you can see, plop it right there and then staple it in. Nothing fancy and nothing crazy here, just using some I think it's probably maybe 3/4 inch staples to staple this panel into the framing. And then after that, I can go ahead and put the foot part directly onto that, I don't know, piece that I'm nailing in right now, and start finally assembling it and putting it back together. All right, so fast forward, I basically lined it up with the lines that I had already made and screwed it directly into the other piece of framing. Now, this is the drawers and the slides, and I took that out when I took everything else out. They were in separate pieces, and I added another 2x4 because, again, I needed to raise the bottom 1.5 inches because I forgot to subtract 1.5 inches, and then it kind of just sticks inside that little cubby and scoots all the way to to the back. Now, up until this point, the sides of this are still open, so I can reach back there and kind of move it and square it if I need to. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and put the front on this. I haven't screwed the slides in yet, and you'll see why in just a second. So I'm going to staple this piece of paneling right here, and then I'll end up cutting the holes out and then squaring up the slides once I actually put the drawer in to make sure that the drawer slides in and out before I screw everything back together. Now, I bet you're thinking to yourself, Heather, why did you just put the paneling directly over those cubby holes that you said were supposed to be drawers? Well, there's a reason for that. It's because I don't feel like cutting the holes out and taking a gamble and doing math. So I decided to drill a pilot hole and use my router to cut it out instead because it's reliable and I'll cut the hole right every single time and don't have to worry about doing any math when I don't want to. Some days I like doing math more than others. This was just one of those days where I was like, you know what? I'm taking the easy way out today because I still have so much to do on this camper. And sometimes I just get overwhelmed and I take the win for myself. All right, so we have these nice pretty holes. I can go ahead and clean up this mess because if there's anything that drives me crazy is when I open something that's never supposed to be seen, like a cubby hole in an RV, and there's sawdust everywhere. And I'm like, you couldn't have at least cleaned that up. I mean, you had to have known somebody was going to see that eventually. So I always clean up in case somebody opens like a cubby and is like, ugh, she didn't even clean up the sawdust. So I hope nobody can ever say that about me because I'm going to clean it up. And once that's in, I can go ahead and put these drawers back in and basically measure and make sure that they're square and they pull in and out. And obviously screw the slides into the framing right there. But then I came around from the sides and screwed in the support for the slides in the back because, you know, those are kind of like, I mean, they can get off square pretty easily if you're not careful. And so I put the drawers in and then marked it and screwed it down. That way I know it's perfectly square with the drawer and I don't have to worry about it being like crazy or tight when pulling it in and out. All right, fast forward, everything's in, everything's square. I can go ahead and put these side panels on since I'll no longer need to get to the supports in the back. And this is all just scrap 1/8 inch paneling that I had, so it's nothing crazy. I like to use 1/8 inch for the front part right here, just because it's a little more durable and you get a little more traffic in these areas, like getting in and out of the bed than you would, you know, I guess the front part right there where you're not really getting in from like the front of the bed, you're more getting in from the back part of the bed. So after I've got all that stapled in, I can go ahead and start working on the top. And I think this is maybe 1/2 inch OSB that I picked. I can't remember. I think I matched it to whatever the thickness of the foot part was already there, the foot part with the drawers. So I actually saved that piece and I'm basing the thickness of this piece off the thickness of that piece. So I'm just going to cut this whole front piece right here. Again, nothing crazy. Y'all have seen me cut pieces and panels of wood 17 gazillion times. That was me waving at my neighbor, and you see there's a random trash bag just blowing in the back. There's constantly random trash in my house, so y'all just ignore that. Obviously, I'll cut it to width, and then I'll cut it to length. And this piece, I mean, I didn't really have to cut a whole lot off of this piece. Most of the campers are just like shy of 8 feet. So it just, there's not really a whole lot of waste, especially when you're putting in like flooring and stuff like that. There's really, I mean, you see how much, like I maybe cut 3 inches off that. So then I can bring it in here, and obviously it is a tight fit with the windows and everything else. So just go ahead and watch me struggle to fit this in with the window trim because it fits perfectly between the walls, but then not with the window trim. So I should have brought it in further and then like lowered it below the windows and then slid it in. But you know, that's not what I did. So instead I just put a bunch of scuffs in the wall that I had already painted and kicked it into place because that's just where I'm at right now. So good news is it fit perfectly. And then this is me just making sure that the wires aren't getting pinched. I had to pull the wires up for the outlets right there, and then I can slide it into place and start screwing it in. And again, nothing crazy with the screws here. I used maybe 1 5/8" deck screws to screw this into the framing. Just make sure you get it into the actual framing and you're not just screwing it into the cubby hole that's going to be underneath this. So try to catch the framing as much as you can. And then this is that other piece that was actually, I saved it from the bed. And so now that I know that that fits, I'm going to screw that in. And then this is a piece of 1/8" paneling that I cut to go on top because it just didn't look as good with the OSB because the OSB is kind of rough. And I mean, if you wanted to use like 3/4" plywood instead of like layering it like this, you can totally do that. But 3/4" plywood's pretty expensive and I wanted a nice finish on this. And so this was just a lot cheaper to layer it like that. So I'm just stapling this in with just some of those 3/4" staples. And then I can put this piece on and then screw the hinges on. And then that is almost done with the bed. We still have the 2 little side cubbies to do, but we won't get there for a while until I've put it all back together and done the countertops. Anyway, can't wait to see y'all for day 15. Y'all have a great afternoon.